This video is going to introduce the Statplot using number 75 in section 1.1. On the left I have your assignment notes, which walks you through the different steps. In the center I have the actual problem from the book and the calculator on the right. Now the first thing we need to do is clear any lists that might already be in the calculator. So to do that I push Stat and then number 1, or actually number 4, for clear list. Now I need to tell the calculator what lists I want it to clear. So I'm going to click second and the number 1 because that stands for list 1, comma, second, L2, enter, and it's done. So now I'm ready to enter my data. I go and press the Stat button again, and this time I'm going to choose Edit. Highlight L1, and we're going to enter the dates. Now instead of using 1920 for my first year, it says to use 20 for the year 1920. So following that, I'm going to fill in the rest of these numbers. Now that L1 is complete, I'm going to use the right arrow and go over to L2 and do the same thing. I'm going to fill in all of the numbers from the life expectancy table. Now you can see I've got all the values entered for L2. The next thing I'm going to do is set my window. Now normally if I look at my window it's going to go from -10 to +10, but I'm going to reset my window so that it will be a better representation of my data. So I'm going to set the X-min, which is representing our year, to go from 20 up to 110, and the X scale just tells me how often the calculator is going to put a tick mark along the X-axis. Okay, for the Y-axis I'm going to go from 50 to 80. And again I'm going to use a scale of 10. Now my window is ready and I need to tell it to make a stat plot. To do that I'm going to press second and the Y equals screen, which is my stat plot screen. Right now number 1 is highlighted, so if I choose number 1 it's going to show me the information for plot number 1. Whatever the cursor is blinking on, that's what I can change the setting to if I press enter. It's off right now, but it's blinking on the word on, so if I press enter, my stat plot is now turned on. The only other two things that I'm concerned about are the X list and Y list, and then I get to choose how I want it to represent my data. We're not going to worry about the type. All of the ones that we do will be with the points, which is already the default. So using the arrows, I don't need to change L1 and L2, but I do think that I'm going to change this to the little box. Alright, my stat plot is ready to go. Now before I actually plot the points, I'm going to check by pressing Y equals to see, yep, I have an equation here that I don't want to graph. All I want to graph is the plot 1. Now you can see that it's black, which means it's turned on. Now I have my choice here with this equation to either go to the equal sign and turn it off, or I can simply just clear the equation. Alright, now it looks like I'm ready to press my graph button and see what my points look like. Now you will see we had chose the little box, and so it gives me a little box for each value that represents a year and the life expectancy. Now when we graphed this, we set our windows based on what we had in our table. But I want to show you another way to set the window that might be even a little easier. If I go back to Zoom Standard, I get my regular XY axis. Now my values don't even show up on that because it's way out to the right and up. Now I could zoom out. I could check zoom and zoom out. And there's my scatter plot. But that's not a real great representation. What I want to do is zoom in on just that area. I could do the Z box or zoom in, but what's actually easier is if I choose zoom and then the down arrow to zoom stat. That tells the calculator to look at my stat plots and pick the best window for my stat plot. So I'm going to push enter, and there you go. If I press my window button, you'll see that these values are very close to what we had set originally. Now, as we progress to other modeling problems, you will be asked to come up with the model equation. But for this first one, it's already given. So you're told to graph that along with the data that you have and to see how close your curve is. So we're going to go to the y equals screen and we're going to enter the equation that's given. Now you see I've entered the equation in the y equals screen, and when I press graph, it's going to graph that line or that curve along with my stat plot. Alright, so this is called a line of regression because what it does is it best represents these points. Now they're not exactly on it, all of them, but it's close. Now, for part C, we're supposed to use the graph of the model to estimate the life expectancy of a child for the years 2005 and 2010. So let's do that. Let's do second, calc, value, and I'm going to enter for the year 2005, that would correspond to the number 105. And let's see what happens. Looks like my life expectancy would be 76.8 years. All right, we do that again. Number 1. And for the year 2010, that would be 110. Now, notice that we got an error. Now, the reason we got an error is because my window doesn't extend far enough to include that. So I'm going to press number 2, that says go to. And what I need to do is go to my window and make my X values go out just a little bit further. It only goes out to 108. So I'm going to press my down button and I'm going to tell it to go out to 115. I'm going to graph it. Now I should be able to do second, calc, value, 110. And I get my value, 76.98. All right, now, part D asks you to do a little analyzing of the model and the data that you have. It says, do you think this model can be used to predict the life expectancy of a child 50 years from now? Explain. All right, so in order to do that, let's look at what the graph would look like if we were 50 years out into the future. So to do that, I'm going to need to zoom. Now when I zoom out, the cursor is right here. That's just as good. I can move it around if I want to zoom in on a different place. But around this area is just fine. So I'm going to zoom out. Now look what that curve does. If I look at that curve, and I'm just going to trace it. Now notice I'm tracing, and if you look at the bottom, it's going along, it's tracing my stat plot. So to jump to the other curve, I need the up or down button. Now it's on my model curve, which is shown up here. So when I trace it, look what happens. 50 years from now would be, 150, 160. And notice what happens to the curve as I go out. Do you really think the life expectancy when I get way out here is going to be 34 years old? I don't think so. And that's often a problem with regression curves. They will be accurate in the short run when I'm over here and a little bit further too. But as I move further down the x-axis, it's going to often be not a good representation on my data, and this is a good example of that. Okay, so what we've gone over is the stat plot, how to enter, clear the lists, enter data for the lists, set up your stat plot, use either the zoom fit or set the window manually, graph your data, graph your modeling equation, and then make some predictions and analyze your data. That's it.